How about you calling ICE agents modern-day Gestapo? That also stands. Do you think that that helps our federal government carry out its law enforcement?
I think best practices in law enforcement
policies?
by identifying who you are, identifying the vehicles, and making sure everyone has due process helps our law enforcement. I think covering your faces.
So you think that that helps calling our law enforcement agents that? What does ICE stand for, Governor? Immigration, Custom, Enforcement, right? These are the guys that are tasked with enforcing immigration, federal immigration laws.
That's right. Federal. That's their job. It's not the state's job.
So you think that calling them Gestapo is helping? You're not.
Tempers flared during a House Oversight Committee hearing as Representative Eli Crane challenged Minnesota Governor Tim Walz over immigration policies, public statements about ICE, border security, free speech, and comments about political opponents. What began as a discussion about state and federal immigration enforcement quickly turned into one of the hearing's most heated exchanges.
Okay. Governor, I want to ask you, why are you lying to this committee?
I am not.
Who's the top law enforcement officer in the state of Minnesota?
The top law enforcement officer? Yep. Attorney General.
Yeah, that's right. What's his name? What's his name?
Are you asking me, do you know his name?
Do you know his name? Do you know his name?
I know the AG Ellison.
This is an article right here I'd like to submit for the record. Minnesota AG says will not enforce federal immigration laws as DOJ threatens to prosecute officials who resist.
Without objection to ordered.
Why are you lying to this committee? That is the top law enforcement officer in your state who's saying he will not comply with the federal government.
Nothing in his opinion changes the fact that state law requires all state and county officials to ask for immigration status when a convicted felon is committed.
No, I'm sorry, Governor. He is saying he will not comply with federal laws. That's your top law enforcement officer.
Changes,
You're lying and misrepresenting yourself to this committee. Now I want to ask you this. Do you think in that line of questioning, free health care, food assistance, free college tuition, driver's licenses, and cash assistance, do you think that that's helping or hurting this government manage its border security and policies?
Well, Minnesota ranks first in health care. We rank third in safety on our roads.
Let me answer that for you. Okay. It's actually hurting because what you've created
safer and more prosperous.
Created a state that is now a magnet that is drawing illegals
There's no sanctuary law in Minnesota, Congress.
I know you guys haven't put it that way on the books, but your state has everything, every element in it that is consistent with the sanctuary state.
That's
Moving on, Mr. Walz. How about you calling ICE agents modern-day Gestapo? That also stands. Do you think that that helps our federal government carry out its law enforcement?
I think best practices in law enforcement
policies?
by identifying who you are, identifying the vehicles, and making sure everyone has due process helps our law enforcement. I think covering your faces.
So you think that that helps calling our law enforcement agents that? What does ICE stand for, Governor? Immigration, Custom, Enforcement, right? These are the guys that are tasked with enforcing immigration, federal immigration laws.
That's right. That's their job. It's not the state's job.
So you think that calling them Gestapo is helping? You're not standing in the way. None of the messaging, none of the rhetoric is standing in the way of this administration doing what they've been tasked to do. Is that what you're saying?
I think what would help them is to follow due process, and when they do these missions, do the things that we expect of law enforcement.
How about when you went on Anderson Cooper, Governor Walz, and you said, how high is this wall? If it's 25 feet, then I'll invest in a 30-foot ladder factory. Do you think that that helps our federal government carry out its law enforcement, its border security and policy operations?
When did I say that?
You went on Anderson Cooper and said that. Do you not remember saying that? Because you've said so many outlandish things that you can't even keep track of them?
The point being is...
The clip is there for everybody. It's there for all Americans. If you guys want to go watch it, it's an easy Google. All right, Governor, you recently went on Gavin Newsom's podcast. You stated in regards to MAGA voters, I scare them a little bit, which is why they spend so much time on me. No, I'm serious because they know I can fix a truck. That's your direct quote. You also said on the show, I think I could kick most of their asses. I want to be very clear with you, Governor. You do scare us a bit, but it's not because you can fix a truck or change a tire. It's actually because of your radical left-wing agenda. You supported putting tampons in boys' bathrooms. You advocated for the disarming of Americans of their Second Amendment rights. You're pro-sanctuary city, as we have uncovered here today. You claim there is no guarantee to free speech when it comes to misinformation and hate speech. That right there is why the American people have such a hard time with you. It's not because we're crazy MAGA people. It's because of your radical left-wing agenda. I want to ask you on that last one where you claim there's no guarantee to free speech. Did you pick that up on one of your 30 trips to communist China, Governor? That sounds a lot like something that they would do. Yes or no?
So I don't believe hate speech
Okay.
has a place in there. Hate speech that incites violence.
Governor Walz, you said that Kamala Harris picked you for vice president to code talk to white guys. How did that work out for this administration? How well did you do with white guys?
I don't have the
You
data.
lost by 22 points to white guys. And it's because you talk like the way you do, you say the things you do, and you have this radical left-wing ideology. So if you want to continue that rhetoric, go on, brother. Keep doing it. We'll keep destroying you in elections.
And the
Thank you,
people
and
of
I yield back.
The people of Minnesota will continue to have me serve them.
Exchange was about much more than a disagreement between Representative Eli Crane and Governor Tim Walz. At its core, it reflected one of the biggest political debates in America today: how immigration laws should be enforced, how much cooperation states should provide to federal authorities, and where the line exists between state independence and federal responsibility. From the very beginning, Crane chose an aggressive line of questioning. Rather than discussing broad immigration statistics or general policy outcomes, he focused directly on statements made by Minnesota officials and comments Walz himself had made in public appearances. His strategy was clear: challenge the governor's claim that Minnesota is not interfering with federal immigration enforcement and argue that the state's policies and rhetoric have the practical effect of discouraging cooperation with federal authorities. The first major issue involved Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and comments regarding federal immigration enforcement. Crane used those comments to argue that Minnesota leadership is sending mixed messages. In his view, it is difficult for a governor to claim that nothing in the state stands in the way of federal immigration enforcement when prominent officials within the state government have publicly criticized or resisted aspects of that enforcement. Walz responded by pointing to existing state laws and procedures, but Crane was less interested in the legal details and more interested in what he viewed as the broader political message being sent. That distinction is important because many immigration debates today are not solely about laws. They are also about public perception. Supporters of stronger enforcement often argue that rhetoric matters because it influences whether people believe immigration laws will actually be enforced. Critics of aggressive enforcement often argue that rhetoric can be used to justify policies they view as unfair or overly harsh. This hearing captured that conflict perfectly. The discussion then moved into benefits provided by Minnesota, including health care, education assistance, driver's licenses, and other services. Crane argued that such policies could make Minnesota more attractive to undocumented immigrants. This is a common argument made by supporters of stricter immigration controls. They believe that benefits and services can create incentives for illegal immigration and increase pressure on taxpayers and public resources. Supporters of these policies typically offer a different perspective. They argue that access to health care, education, and basic services improves public safety and public health while helping communities function more effectively. They often contend that denying services can create larger problems that ultimately affect everyone. This disagreement reflects a broader philosophical divide about the role of government and how immigration-related challenges should be managed. One of the most heated moments came when Crane raised Walz's comments comparing IC tactics to those of the Gestapo. This issue highlights a recurring conflict in immigration politics. Federal immigration officers and their supporters often argue that agents are enforcing laws passed by Congress and carrying out duties assigned to them by elected officials. Critics sometimes argue that certain enforcement methods raise serious concerns about civil liberties, due process, and transparency. The reason this issue generates so much controversy is that both sides view the debate through very different lenses. Supporters of ICE tend to see criticism of the agency as criticism of law enforcement itself. Critics tend to view their concerns as focused on tactics and procedures rather than individual officers. Because those perspectives are so different, discussions about immigration enforcement frequently become emotional and politically charged. The hearing also demonstrated how modern congressional exchanges often blend policy disagreements with political messaging. Rather than focusing solely on immigration enforcement, Crane broadened the discussion to include free speech, cultural issues, and comments Walz had made about political opponents. This approach is increasingly common because lawmakers often seek to connect multiple issues into a larger narrative about a politician's worldview. For Crane, that narrative was centered on the idea that Walz represents a progressive political agenda that many voters reject. By bringing up topics beyond immigration, He attempted to frame the hearing as a broader discussion about ideology rather than a narrow policy dispute. Whether viewers agree with that framing or not, it clearly shaped the direction of the exchange. Another important element of the hearing involved political rhetoric itself. Walz has become a prominent national political figure, and many of his comments receive significant attention from both supporters and critics. Crane's questions reflected a belief that elected officials should be held accountable not only for their policies, but also for their public statements. This is increasingly common in today's political environment, where interviews, podcasts, social media posts, and public appearances often become central topics during congressional hearings. The exchange also highlighted the challenge public officials face when defending controversial statements. In modern politics, a comment made months or years earlier can quickly become the focus of a hearing. Lawmakers frequently revisit past remarks because they believe those comments reveal priorities, values, or intentions. Witnesses, meanwhile, often try to provide additional context or redirect attention to current policies. That tension was visible throughout this entire exchange. Beyond the political theater, however, the hearing touched on a genuinely significant policy question. To what extent should states cooperate with federal immigration authorities? This debate has existed for decades, but it has intensified as immigration has become one of the defining issues in American politics. Some leaders believe states should actively assist federal enforcement efforts. Others believe states should maintain greater independence and focus primarily on their own priorities. The disagreement is unlikely to disappear anytime soon because it involves competing visions of federalism, public safety, and individual rights. Supporters of stronger enforcement argue that consistent cooperation is necessary for an effective immigration system. Supporters of state autonomy argue that local governments should have flexibility in deciding how resources are used and how communities are policed. From a political standpoint, Crane likely accomplished his objective. He created several memorable moments, repeatedly challenged Walz's credibility, and highlighted statements that many conservative voters find controversial. Walz, meanwhile, attempted to defend his record while emphasizing due process and constitutional principles. The result was a confrontation that reflected the deep divisions currently shaping immigration debates across the country. Ultimately, this hearing was not simply about Minnesota. It was about two fundamentally different approaches to governance. One approach prioritizes aggressive immigration enforcement, close cooperation with federal authorities, and skepticism toward progressive reforms. The other places greater emphasis on civil liberties, state decision-making, and concerns about how immigration policies affect communities and individual rights. The sharp exchange between Crane and Walz served as a vivid example of how those competing visions continue to collide in Congress and across the nation. For viewers watching the full hearing, the key question is not necessarily which side delivered the strongest soundbite. The larger question is whether America's immigration challenges are best addressed through stricter enforcement, broader community protections, or some combination of both. That debate remains unresolved, and hearings like this show just how far apart many policymakers still are when it comes to finding common ground.